even the organization I work for was born out of a short-term mission. The founder, with his team from his local church, were serving a local church in Ukraine. For many years, many years, they were shipping containers of food and cloth and other supplies to this local church. Until one time, at the end of their trip, they sat down with the pastor and they were asking, how can we serve you more? How can we serve you better? And the pastor was very open, and he said, can I ask, is there a better way you can help us to help ourselves? And they asked, what do you mean? And he said, every time you come and you bring these things, you are crippling the local economy. Local business people here are shut down because you're providing free things. Secondly, the members of my church are always waiting for your next trip to get free things. So you are causing damage in two ways. You are crippling the local economy and you are creating dependency. And what happened from that time, from that openness to share feedback, no matter how it might be offending to the person supporting you, help them to forge a better way of serving one another.
Welcome to Reimagining Short-Term Missions, a podcast that takes an honest yet hopeful look at the things that the church does in the name of missions. A podcast that seeks to inspire Christ followers to rethink the status quo of short-term missions and to forge a better way forward. We feature frank conversations with people from all over the world, those who go on mission trips and those who host them. And we don't shy away from tackling the hard and uncomfortable questions. Questions like, can you honestly speak about short-term mission partnerships if one partner is always the giver and the other always the receiver? What makes a sending church assume they know what is best for the people they want to serve, even when their well-meaning efforts sometimes cause more harm than good? What is it that makes those on the receiving end of foreign teams and resources so afraid to speak up when they know better than anyone what their communities really need? I'm Forrest, Professor of Global Studies at Northwest University in Seattle and co-editor of the book Reimagining Short-Term Missions. I'll be talking to Emmanuel Karegyesa, a pastor with the Anglican Church of Rwanda and a community development practitioner with Hope International in the East and Central Africa region. Emmanuel is also a writer for the book Reimagining Short-Term Missions. In his chapter called Working Side by Side, A Better Way Forward in Short-Term Missions, he and his co-author Tom Rakabopa insist that there is great potential for good in short-term missions, but only if sending churches learn how to truly listen to their hosts, who are the experts on their own cultural contexts, and only if those on the receiving end find the courage to speak up and speak into the lives of their short-term guests. Friends, there are better ways to love and serve the world, and it starts with courageous conversation. Welcome to Reimagining Short-Term Missions. Welcome, Emmanuel. Perhaps you could orient our listeners to tell us about your context, about your work day to day, and about where you are.
Yeah, thank you. I live in Kigali, Rwanda, where I serve as an assistant pastor with the local church of the Anglican Church. And as you shared, I also work with Hope International as the regional coordinator for the Savings Group Ministry. And what that really means is to find partners, and partners means church networks and like-minded ministries to work together to develop contextualized ministries that fits their context and helps them to achieve their mission.
So along with Tom Rakabopa, you wrote a chapter in the book called Reimagining Short-Term Missions. The chapter itself is called Working Side by Side, A Better Way Forward in Short-Term Missions. How would you sum up the main points that you and Tom are trying to make in this chapter about short-term missions?
Short-term missions are an opportunity to do great things, life-changing things, if they are done well. And what we are sharing is that doing missions should not be a one-sided thing, which we often see in many cases. We have the church in the global north serving the church in the global south. Sometimes I believe it's only because I think from a position of abundance, we have resources, we have time, we can get to Africa, there is great need and there is great brokenness. We have experience, we have resources, we can help do some things. However, I think what we need to see is how is the body of Christ serving one another from a mutual perspective. How is the Global South Church serving the Global North Church? What are the relationships there? My belief is that there is a lot of brokenness in the body of Christ, either in the North or the South. And I believe there are resources, there are experiences in the Global South Church. One example I could point out is how is the church in Rwanda relating to reconciliation? How is the church in Kenya, in Ethiopia, in South Sudan, helping to bring its communities together? And we see lots of brokenness in the North as well that could get help from the church in the South. But who is helping to create that connection? If the pastors or the church in the Global South has experiences that they would share with the Global North, is there an opportunity to create that linkage? And who is going to do it? If there is no, I think, mutual relationship and understanding and desire to see the experiences that are here that can also benefit us, versus we have maybe people who have their own resources, if I say it like that. Because most churches will, in the Global North, will mobilize members, and members will mobilize their money and create a team and they know what they want to do, and they will come to the Global South. Versus the church organizing something with the members, working with the Global South Church, and having that mutuality and connectedness to learn from one another. And the other concern we really have is a position of humility and equality, as the body of Christ. Paul, I think in Paul's letters, he uses the body as having many parts, and the many parts that benefit one another. And each one is equal to one another. There is no one that is higher than the other, or this one is higher than the other. If one is hurting, the others are hurting. If one is not working, the other ones are not working. And with this, I think if we come from a position of wanting to learn, wanting to listen, wanting to understand the local context, wanting to understand the cultures that are beneficial in many ways, we can create this space for mutual learning from one another. Again, it stems from a position of imbalances. One side without resources, and the other one with resources, and the other one wanting to serve the other. But if we saw resources beyond material things, I think there is an opportunity to share and to learn from one another.
You point out that one of the things that keeps sending churches from actually having a sense that they need churches in the Global South is resources. So the churches who are well-resourced can assume that they don't, on many levels, have needs, right? That the needs are only in the Global South, and then the direction of giving and serving is one way. Do you think there are other things at work that keep the churches in the Global North from actually seeing themselves as equal, and perhaps not recognizing the gifts of other churches that they want to serve, quote unquote? What else is going on, do you think, besides just the fact that some churches have more resources than others?
Particularly, I think it's how we view poverty and how we view missions. One, if we see missions as a wealthy church serving a non-wealthy church, then the Global South is always going to depend on the Global North Church, because what we see as missions is we are going to serve a poor context where people don't have many things. But if we see poverty as brokenness in all of our relationships, either brokenness in terms of our personal relationships as an individual, my dignity, my value, my relationships in terms of friendships, in terms of households, in terms of our relationship with God, in terms of the environment, many ways, many ways. That the global south can benefit, but also the global north can benefit. But simply because we see missions as serving a poor community that does not have ABCZ that we script out, in terms of material things, in terms of health, in terms of education, in terms of housing, in terms of this and this, then what we need is people who have money, who have wealth, who have time, who can fund and support these things. Versus an example of Jesus Christ. He meets one young rich man and he says, Jesus, what do I need to do to get into heaven? And Jesus tells him, you need to do ABCZ. And the young man says, but I do all these things. And Jesus says, go and sell all you have and give them to the poor. Yeah, this young man has everything he needs, but he is missing something. And I think that's the point we need to look at things. It's not always about wealth and material things. We are broken in many ways.
You and Tom write at one point in the chapter, and I'll quote you here, host churches must be aware of their own needs, propose solutions within their context, and maintain open communication and candor about potential missions activities or initiatives. So as you point out here in that particular passage, mutuality depends on honest, open communication from both visitors and from hosts. What are some of the things that hosts of short-term mission teams have a hard time being open about? I mean, why is it so hard to talk about some things with short-term visitors?
The first very thing that people need to understand is once you have a perceptual set, you have already built it into your mind that I'm going to serve a poor church. I'm going to a poor community that needs this, that needs this, that needs this. And here is the solution. This is the resources we have. This is what we're going to do. Then there is not enough room in asking, how can we serve you? What resources do you have? And if this happens over and over and over, even the person who is receiving creates this mindset of not even being open to tell you that, you know what, I think some of the resources that you bring to us we already have. Maybe what we need is this and this and this. If we work together, we can do this together and we can do it better. And one example I can share is while I still worked at the Peace Plan in Rwanda, a man who was passionate about coming to Rwanda, but his heart was far from Rwanda because all he knew about Rwanda was the genocide. He gets on a plane from California and gets in Rwanda, and he's hesitant to get off the plane. And the question he has in mind is, my business, my family, my relationships, what would happen if I never get back to my country? However, willingly he steps off the plane, and the first thing is he sees is people who are very welcoming, who are warm-hearted, who take him in the house and ask to feed him and to do all these things and to celebrate with him. And he is amazed by the generosity and the open-heartedness that he sees around the community. And while he's doing his trip around the country, one thing he notices is that children are the ones who are fetching water. And they carry jerrycans up here. And this is happening during school time. He takes the time to go down the hill to see the wells where children are fetching water. It's actually dirty water that they are going to use for drinking and cooking food and using in the house. And his heart is broken. He says, how can children walk long distances with heavy jerrycans only to fetch dirty water that will make them sick? And he starts thinking, well, if we fixed boreholes like hand pumps everywhere, people would have access to safe drinking water. Only to realize that people are not even still using the boreholes. They are still going to their wells. And when he was daring to ask, why are you not using the wells? They told him, these wells, the water has minerals. It's causing us more problems. Our teeth are getting stained and many other things. Maybe, some of them, the wells were broken and nobody was fixing them. And then he was asking, why are you not fixing the wells? And the questions they were asking him is, who can fix them? Who knows how to fix them locally? Who will provide the money? Is it the leaders? Is it the church pastor? Is it people around the community that you never organized to understand the value and contribute towards this? It changed his thinking of how he wanted to do things. He switched from doing boreholes to doing water tanks around schools, around churches. But even with that, he missed one point. He was always the one fixing the foundation. He was always the one buying the tanks and fixing the tanks and putting gutters. Again, the same problem happened. The gutters were filled with dirt and broken pieces of tree leaves. And he was asking, "What? This is for you, not for me. Why are you not doing it?" But who is supposed to do it? You fixed it. You left it. It's here. And then he started, through honest conversations, people started telling him, you know what? People can contribute. We have constructors in this community. We have stones. We can mobilize people to buy cement. People need to feel their contribution. They need to feel and contribute towards what they need. And when he started working this way, he did more than he could ever have imagined. There was extra money because there were local laborers. There was local stones collected by the church members and the village people through community initiatives. Let's help ourselves. People were buying cement, and they were available to do all sorts of work around every water tank fixed on a church or a school. And even after he was left, he was amazed to see that people are maintaining and fixing what was originally breaking and nobody was fixing. So that mindset of working and collaborating with people to find solutions, even though, creates a long-term ownership and sustainability of what we are trying to do together.
Well, it seems to me that really key to that story is that there had to be change on both sides. On the one hand, apparently, this person who was bringing the resources from California decided that he could actually listen, decided that he needed to listen to the wisdom of local people in local context. On the other hand, you have a clear example of people coming to him to say, this is not working, having the courage to actually challenge the person who is bringing these resources to say, we think there is a better way, which is, difficult, obviously. Even though you've experienced the downsides of short-term trips, you have hope for them, it seems. And I want to quote you again from the chapter. You write, short-term trips designed within authentic partnerships, constructed on a foundation of equality and implemented through loving and open communication, can play a life-giving role in the sending church and the host church. Such missions position both to be catalysts of holistic, sustainable transformation in their communities and in the global church. And they bring glory to God who created and loves every tribe, nation, and people equally. You seem to be making the case here that short-term missions, when done well, can actually be transformative for both sides, for both visitors and for hosts. Is this mostly just an ideal that you strive for, or have you actually seen this happening with short-term sending churches or organizations that you've worked with? What does it actually look like when this is happening in the real world?
Even the organization I work for was born out of a short-term mission. The founder, with his team from his local church, were serving a local church in Ukraine. For many years, many years, they were shipping containers of food and cloth and other supplies to this local church. Until one time, at the end of their trip, they sat down with the pastor and they were asking, how can we serve you more? How can we serve you better? And the pastor was very open, and he said, can I ask, is there a better way you can help us to help ourselves? And they asked, what do you mean? And he said, every time you come and you bring these things, you are crippling the local economy. Local business people here are shut down because you're providing free things. Secondly, the members of my church are always waiting for your next trip to get free things. So you are causing damage in two ways. You are crippling the local economy and you are creating dependency. And what happened from that time, from that openness to share feedback, no matter how it might be offending to the person supporting you, helped them to forge a better way of serving one another. And from that time on, Hope International was born to work with the pastor and the local people to figure out what their needs are and how they can come alongside them to serve them better, to serve the people, but also the local entrepreneurs. And from that time on, what Hope does is to come alongside church networks and like-minded organizations to create contextualized ministries that would help the local church to reach its impact, to serve its members in many ways, materially, spiritually, socially, such that people are flourishing and communities are flourishing rather than harming them in an effort to do good. It takes that intentionality, I should say, to ask for feedback even when you think you will be hurt. You might be hurt, but you might be serving better and creating flourishing families and communities. And currently, I just returned from a trip in Kenya to work with one of our local partners, and I was amazed. One of the community leaders sharing that one organization that supports children to go to school for many years. And when they designed a ministry that would serve caregivers, after 2 to 3 years, one of the caregivers came out and said, "You know what? You have been supporting my child for this time. But through the help of my savings groups, I have the opportunity to take care of my other children and my child. Can you take the support you've been giving me to find another family that needs and support their child?" And this is not this is not because this woman is rich. It's because her heart and her mind has changed. She's still in need, but she thinks she can, and there's someone who is more deserving that can get this support. So the more we can design together, collaboratively, contextually, the better we can serve. We can build, we can cause change, even when there is still need. But what changes first is the mind and the heart to do things differently.
If you were to sum up your advice to, say, just those churches that tend to send teams cross-culturally, or those who are on the teams, what advice would you give them if they wanted to be part of really helping to create a new paradigm of short-term missions? What would your advice be in terms of summing that up?
One is, are you asking the questions? What is your need? How can we come alongside you? Why? How? What are the local resources available? To build sustainability and to build ownership. Those questions are really important. Yes, there might be perceived need and visible need, but there is more deeper layers to those needs that we need to understand and to work against. That if we don't, then ownership and sustainability becomes a problem. So it takes intentionality to really ask those deep questions. Who is your bridge? There are lots and lots of cultural elements to understand. There is context to understand. And usually this is not something you see with a short-term missions team that is coming for 1 week or 2 weeks. So you need people who will understand the local context, who will understand the challenges, who will be open with the local church or the local people, and to ask these questions and to challenge perspectives. The other thing I think I would mention is, are you thinking long term? What could you do differently if you want long-term transformation? How do you create consistency? How do you build relationships of trust that are really meaningful on both sides? Are you recognizing need from one side and not need maybe from another perspective? Is there something you can learn from the other context you are serving? So there's mutual benefit.
What would you say to those who tend to be in the hosting context, receiving short-term teams? How can they be part of, working against the status quo brokenness of short-term missions and helping to create a new paradigm for short-term missions?
First thing I think is for the local church or the host church to understand its needs. And to understand its needs is not to just say that we have many children that are not going to school. There is deeper than that. Why? Is it because families don't have money? Or is it because they have competing priorities? Is it because of cultural mindset, maybe against who goes to school and who doesn't go to school? Understanding the need deeply will help on how you even shape and guide the teams that are visiting. The other thing, I think, is openness to share feedback honestly. I remember one example. We went out in the communities with a short-term mission to do training, and the people who were training were farmers. And farmers, cow people, they graze cows. And the first thing they do in the morning is to take care of their cows, the milking and sending them out to the fields for feed. And that means they will not be on the training ground on time. They probably will come at 10 a.m. And because of that, they want to leave early because their animals are coming back home. And the team was disappointed because people did not come on time and wanted to leave early. And the question I had in my mind all along was, like, what do they want these people to do? They are farmers. They need to take care of their goats, their sheep, and their cows before they can come to the training. And they need to go home early so they can do what they need to do. And again, it came to my mind that there is lack of contextualization. Nobody has prepared the people who are coming and the people who are receiving. There is that room to share openly, that people know the expectations and clarify issues before you create confusion and misunderstanding. And sometimes the host church or the lead person has to be the one on this ground, to be honest, to not fear that they will offend the teams. The offense is not is not sharing openly, because they will be surprised in many ways. And this is when the hurting starts to happen. But if they were prepared enough before they're coming, then people would understand the context in which they're coming. Sometimes it happens to us also, local people. I was doing a training in the Maasai, with the Maasai people in northern Tanzania and in Kenya. We were talking about saving money. And my concern to them was, how are you saving money for emergencies? And one elderly man stood up and said, no, we don't say emergencies here. And I asked, why? You don't plan for emergencies? They said, yes, we do, but we don't call them emergencies. Our belief is, if you plan for emergencies, you are inviting something evil. And so instead of calling it an emergency fund, we call it a social fund. And these are cultural beliefs. Not because they are wrong, but because their understanding and the way they see these things are different. At that point, it was a learning opportunity for me. And I think sharing that, the pastor sharing that with me, changed the way I always deliver whatever I have to deliver. So yes, honest feedback, constructive feedback, to not fear giving it, to be open and candid about things, what is helping and what is not helping, and collaborating, with the team. And also, I think I need to mention this. Sometimes we need to identify the gaps also with us. Sometimes people come with resources and they want to give us those resources, to, especially funding, to do the things we need. I remember we had an opportunity to build a preschool and to build a kitchen that has all the services needed for the children to have a good meal. However, this was not the pastor's need. The pastor needed a hall or a church for his community, and in his mind, he knew if he got the money, he would build a community hall and still have the kitchen that the kids needed for a meal. But he never shared with us. He received the money, he built the community hall and built the kitchen. However, he did not have enough money to buy the cups and the plates and the cupboards and the fridge that was already planned for. And when we asked him, he said, you know what? I think my community needed a church than a kitchen. Oh, to the missionaries, this was a concern to them. This was designated money for the kitchen, not for your community church. It became an issue. And I believe if he had shared openly at the very beginning, people were willing to be flexible and they don't see you as not having integrity. So I think some of these things, as the host church, need to be open about.
You've been listening to the Reimagining Short-Term Missions podcast. If you want to explore more diverse and challenging perspectives like this, check out a new book called Reimagining Short-Term Missions, which includes chapters written by our podcast guests and from many more STM innovators from around the world. Your podcast host is Forrest Inslee, co-editor of that book and a professor of global studies at Northwest University in Seattle. Angel Burns is the book's co-editor, and our podcast producer is Heath Hollinsby. Friends, what we need now is nothing short of a revolution in short-term missions. So please help us spread the word by sharing this podcast with others of like heart and mind. This is the time for reimagining short-term missions.